Okay, so welcome to Colonial Boston. So this website, if you wanted to do this yourself, you could certainly go to this website. You can just Google PBS Colonial Boston, like PBS Colonial Boston, and you could do this yourself, but I thought that it might be confusing for some of you, so I'm going to do it with you so there's absolutely no confusion. So ideally, you have already printed the document for fill in the blank notes, which says Explore Colonial Boston Scavenger Hunt. And then you'll see there are 10 questions we're looking for the answers to. So when you click on this map, we are looking at Boston as a city because it was such a major center for all of the events that are going to happen from the Declaration on through the Revolutionary War. This is where a lot of people were meeting. This is where a lot of our thinkers were living, getting people to participate and be a part of the colonists' revolution. So the first question we're looking for is how many schools were there in Boston at this time? So we can do schools in our filters. We know we're looking in this area, and then we can actually click to see some information. So if you go back to what we just did, this one's easier just to look at the colors. So we can see that there are 3. We want to put 3 for number 1. Number 2, what's the name of the military facility on the far left part of town? So let's switch the map to this view. Far left part of town. I'm going to click on this question mark, and it's called the fortifications. So that's what you want to put for number 2, the fortifications. And it says here the fortifications were a protective wall with a gate. Early on, men guarded the gate to keep out unwanted people like criminals and dangerous animals like wolves. The gate was shut at night. So this almost has the feel of a medieval town because we know that medieval towns, and even prior to the Middle Ages, right, 500 to 1500 AD, towns and villages built walls as a way of protecting from all of the things that Boston was protecting from, and then also having guards stationed at them to be able to deal with anything that might have happened. So that is what number 2 is, fortifications. Number 3, what is the common used for today? So if we go back out to this area, the common is a big public park. So it was a grassy field originally where the colonists' cows grazed. It was also used for military practice and a meeting place, but what you want to write is that it is a large public park. Okay, number 4, what year was the South Grammar School established? So we know there were 3 schools. This one has sort of a significant meaning. So let me get us over here. So right away you can see the year is the answer. So you want to put 1634 as your answer for number 4. But this is significant because that's very early on. So 1634, we know the northern colonies had religious private schools around this time, but this is a school that taught sort of non-religious things as well. So if you lived in colonial times, you would go to school to learn to read and write. This school was called the Latin School because students were taught Latin. And that has to do with religion. Early religious writings are often in Latin, so that was one of the reasons. And you can see that there are a lot of students kind of sitting bench style. You'd have your little book on your lap that you'd be writing in. But this is sort of the beginning of kids going to school. And this would be kids that were able to go to school who weren't needed on their family's farm or business. Okay, so now we're on number 5. What is in the building that used to be the old corner bookstore? So we're going to be right in the same part of town. Here's the old corner bookstore. You're going to love what it is now. It's a Chipotle. So it may not, I mean, it may not stay a Chipotle. I don't know what it is now, if it's still, probably still a Chipotle, but Chipotle is not a very old company. So you could put restaurant. So it was a pharmacy, then it was a bookstore, and now it is a restaurant. So for my answer, I put restaurant dash Chipotle because that's what it is now, and I happen to love Chipotle, so I went ahead and put that. Number 6, but back to Chipotle real quick. Boston, you'll notice if you've ever been or if you can see from these pictures, they like to keep their buildings, which I love. So they keep this original architecture from the time of the colonies and then just convert the inside space to be whatever the company wants. So obviously the Chipotle's in there now, but you can see the bay windows. These are from colonial times. So this is to originally would have showcased whatever the seller was selling. So bookstores could put a display of books in the window, and it's to get the customer who's walking by, right? Because in the 1700s, most people are walking because unless you had a horse, that was the only other way to get around. So you would look in the window and see something that caught your eye, and then you might go in and buy. So it was a good way of getting customers. Number 6, how many boats could places like Clark's shipyard produce in a year? So if I'm looking for a shipyard, I know I need to be down by the water. So over here is Clark's shipyard, and it says the boat-like symbols on land show ships under construction. Boston was a center for shipbuilding. Some shipyards could produce 12 boats a year. That's what you want to put, 12. And that sounds like, that's kind of a small number if you think about the way we think of manufacturing, but in, the 1700s to have 12 of this size of a ship being produced, that's one a month. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. That's all that wood being cut and carved and shaped and sanded and all of the things that go into a boat. We're on number 7, explain the purpose of the rope walks. I'll tell you that it is not like tightrope walking in the circus. So we want to go up here because this is actually a company whose sole purpose was to create rope. If you have a bunch of ships being produced, you need a lot of rope. So it says the ships built by Boston's many shipyards required a great deal of rope. So here comes your answer. Rope factories had rope walks, or straight paths where many strings were laid out. The workers twisted them into a thicker rope. So I started writing from the word rope onward. So you can pause me to get the rest of that definition for number 7. Number 8, how did Beacon Hill get its name? So if it's a hill, we might want to think about, well, if you're on a hill, that means you're visible from a lot of different places in Boston. So what would you need to do with that kind of visibility? What would people need to see that might be helpful to them? Beacon Hill was named for the beacon pole that was planted at the top of the hill. In the early days of the colony, a guard would climb the pole to light a fire and sound the alarm in case of danger. So somebody would actually climb up this pole, and this is your answer for number 8. A guard would climb up, light something on fire at the top so that everybody down below could see the fire, and then they would know something was wrong. So to go inside, again, you were probably thinking, well, how would they know exactly what was wrong? I guess it was just a warning to probably go inside. Okay, number 9, what types of items were made at the copper works? So we want to go up here to the copper works. And of course you're thinking, well, copper, but specifically bowls and spoons. They're actually quite beautiful. To have a copper spoon and a copper bowl now is a luxury because we usually use different types of ceramics or plastic or metal for silverware, but they had copper and they had a lot of coppersmiths that would do this work and they would make bowls and spoons, which is your answer for number 9. And then number 10, what was different about Cornhill Street than other streets in Boston? So we're looking for a specific street. And we're going to go right here. And the answer is because it had a sidewalk. And a sidewalk was a luxury in colonial times because the animals and the people would all share the roads. You'd have carts, you'd have animals like horses and people all walking in the same exact spot of road. So you can imagine the mess left by the horses. And when it rained, the mud plus the horse mess plus your people dropping things, it was a mess. So if you had stone in the middle of the street, that was helpful, but then a sidewalk would be like, whoa, a really nice thing because that's obviously designed for people and not for horses and carts. So that's all 10 of your answers. Again, if you're interested in this and you like revolutionary history, this is a fun website to play on. And you can see the website up here. But again, you could just Google it, PBS Colonial Boston. But otherwise, you are done for your fill in the blank notes. These should live on page 22. And then you're going to go out and take your comprehension check now with your notes in front of you. Have a great day.